Starting with Arsenal's deep build-up, we have them building up in this 3-2 shape and a 4 beyond them with their number 8s, pushing high to support those wide midfielders. We see that here with Vieira and Raya looking for him over the Tottenham 4-1-4-1 press, with Son leading it, the wide midfielders relatively high, as well as Sarr and Maddison. We didn't really see too much opportunity for Tottenham to press and regain possession high as they did on this occasion, because Arsenal dominated most of the first half, and where Tottenham forced the ball back into Raya, he didn't allow himself to get caught or the defenders to get caught and typically launch the ball. On this occasion, he's able to claim a whipped cross from the right hand side and avoids the Tottenham press entirely by throwing the ball out early to sack it. So moving on to Arsenal in their midfield shape, Arsenal have just won back possession through Gabriel Jesus after a Tottenham goal kick, and we see Declan Rice play immediately into the right hand side, and I get to see what was one of the key battles this game with Udogie versus Saka, facilitated by the movement of Ødegaard. With all the tension that Saka draws, he forces Tottenham to drop relatively deep into what typically was a 4-1-4-1 shape, or alternatively, when Sarr dropped, it becomes more of a 4-4-1-1. And this was up against a 3-2, or more controversially, a 1-4-5 shape by Arsenal. I say 1-4-5 because your wide centre-backs push very, very high in those wide spaces, allowing them to more easily rotate possession, but then also counter-press. Of course, we've got the typical centre-forward dropping off the line here in Nketiah. We've got rotation between the number 8 and wide midfielder here on the left-hand side. Less of that on the right-hand side, with Ødegaard typically taking that position between Udogie and the centre-back to draw Udogie narrower. This was really key for Arsenal building up on the left-hand side and allowing Tottenham to overcover, to create space on the right-hand side for Saka to isolate him against Udogie. So we get to see some of that with both the fullback and wide midfielder defending against Vieira. We get to see the problem building up for Tottenham far side, where Udogie is being pulled more and more central, and an advantage for Arsenal is building up on this right-hand side. We also get to see that 4-1-4-1 that I mentioned, as well as the 1-4-5 with Arsenal. So Arsenal switch the ball out to Saka and create a serious problem for Udogie here, with Ødegaard running in behind him and Saka far enough away that he's going to be able to receive and potentially run at Udogie too. And so unsurprisingly, Saka's able to get the ball into Ødegaard. Unfortunately, the Tottenham defence are able to defend it on this occasion, and from there they're able to start a counter-attack. But despite this being a key means of attacking for Tottenham, in the first half they really struggled to knit it all together, and on this occasion it breaks down with Son being offside. Later in the game, of course, there was a number of substitutions, possibly the key one being Jorginho subbing on for Declan Rice. Significantly reduces Arsenal's ability to maintain possession and counter-press on loss of possession, reducing their momentum in the game. As the game wore on and they sought to try and get all 3 points, they did maintain that shape, with Zinchenko still coming inside to help Jorginho. However, there was a lot more onus at this point on crosses into the box. They had a little bit more height with Havertz, but not particularly much threat. This was instead of the intricate play in wide spaces to create shooting opportunities for wingers cutting inside. Okay, another means of attack, not necessarily as important for Arsenal as it was for Tottenham, were Arsenal's counter-attacks. Thought it'd be nice to show this counter-attack in the 25th minute, where Kulusevski wins possession here and is just forced wide by the tensions of Declan Rice, eventually leading to Zinchenko, who was really influential in this game with his neat, tidy, but also incisive passing, counter-attacking down the left-hand side. Tottenham are really good at this, at defending the near side on these counter-attacks, although often that did leave space for Arsenal on the far side, which they typically did switch towards. So on this occasion, they do manage to switch it centrally and then towards the right-hand side, eventually leading to Saka getting the ball. And then we got to see what I found to be an interesting discussion point in who is meant to defend what here. We get some blame eventually leveled at Romero because the ball deflects off him, and because he's the last person to touch it, he's given some level of blame. I think it's really difficult to portion blame on this goal. I think it's easy to blame Udogie because he was having quite a difficult time, but I think that the issue is really the communication between the two of them, in that Johnson runs between Udogie and Saka, but then he decides to still continue tracking White, which he was defending initially. But then Udogie also is tracking White once White runs past Saka, when really one of them needed to take control of the situation and tell the other who he was going to track, making sure that, most importantly, they defend this central space where they know that Saka has shown on numerous occasions to be extremely dangerous. Obviously, the rest is history with Saka coming inside and whipping it towards the far post. Anyway, let me know what you think in the comments down below. Okay, so let's have a look at Tottenham's 2-1 deep build-up, or 2-5 if you include the rest of the midfield and fullbacks, up against what was essentially a 4-4-2 man-marking press by Arsenal. Tottenham's deep build-up was just a lot more interesting to begin with, given the jeopardy. They really struggled initially against this man-marking to get the ball out towards the right-hand side. You had Bissouma pick up this kind of central space, whereas Sarr typically pushed out towards a faux right-back position, with Pedro Porro becoming kind of a number 8, allowing Kulusevski to have a little bit more space on this right-hand side to drop and create. And then centrally, you also had Maddison, who was constantly dropping to try and support this deep build-up. See also far side with Udogie narrowing too. But initially, Arsenal were just able to stifle this, and given how much of Tottenham's deep build-up ended up in these deep positions, inevitably, despite all the rotation between the midfielders and fullback, you eventually get Tottenham caught out here with Maddison and Gabriel Jesus, where if Jesus scored this, he probably decides the game. I felt like comparing that with this 45th minute deep build-up, we have that same 2-1 deep build-up shape. We get Bissouma pushing out towards that for right-back position and Maddison dropping between the centre-forwards to help the centre-backs. We get that same man marking, and we end up with our fullback for Tottenham looking to try and take up number 8 positions. I think Maddison's position is really key in the movement of the ball between the defence and attack, because he was really good at throwing his marker off their centre of balance and being able to just spin them and get into the dangerous space just beyond these centre forwards and start linking Tottenham's attacks in transition. No Udogie narrow, more central, at number 8 position, dropping to try and help. And we get to see that right-hand side overload that I mentioned here with both Bissouma and Sarr. We've got both our fullback narrowing, coming inside. Obviously, that's really useful for narrowing the Arsenal press too. And then we get to see Vicario entice Arsenal's press. See, with Arsenal committing more bodies higher, more towards one side, that will create space elsewhere for Tottenham. So we see him wait until the last moment to switch it out towards this right-hand side. They're able to beat that part of the press. They've drawn Zinchenko higher, and then with a few 1-2s, they're able to drag their team towards the halfway line. And then we get to see the fullbacks in those settled number 8 positions, let's say, with Bissouma as one of the central centre-backs. So either he would stay as a CDM or he could push out into these centre-back positions. We get to see the fullbacks taking up those half-space positions, trying to create a little bit more space for their wide midfielders, allowing them to either combine or pass to the fullback underlapping. So we see some of the benefit of those really high fullbacks here, with just how much space Sarr is able to get free here, because Jesus has been dragged so narrow. I think it's useful to mention the rolling cast at CDM, where you have Bissouma, who can take up that position, but he typically ends up in this wide centre-back or centre-back roles. Maddison, who's playing to try and link the defence and midfield. Then you also have your fullbacks, who both take up these number 8 positions, but then as the ball gets played towards one side, the other one can drop into a CDM role. So here, Pedro Porro will be more of a number 8, with Udogie dropping into more of a CDM role, allowing Maddison also to be able to push higher, and alternatively, you get vice versa. So we get to see the confusion that having Pedro Porro in that number 8 position causes, where the ball is eventually played into him. You have Kulusevski having already attracted the attention of the 2 left-hand side defenders, which creates a little bit more time for Pedro Porro, although they are forced to play back. And then we get to see Udogie dropping into more of that CDM role, as mentioned, and we see that Maddison had been progressing upon that right-hand side, and the ball eventually goes out towards this left-hand side, with Udogie at CDM and your 2 centre midfielders as CDM and wide centre-back. Unfortunately, this attack breaks down, but we'll move on to Tottenham's midfield later in the game, where here they played it long into Kulusevski on this right-hand side with support from Pedro Porro. At this point, Arsenal obviously weren't as good at preventing these transitions, what with having Jorginho rather than Declan Rice. And we get to see some similarities to Arsenal shape earlier in the game, that 1-4 that I mentioned, except you have Romero partnering the 3 typically centre midfielders, which we get to see better here, with the fullbacks still pushing high, still looking to try and get those 3 points, rotating with their wide midfielders. I hope you enjoyed the analysis. If you did, it goes a really long way. If you subscribe, if you share, if you give the video a like. I'm really close to hitting my subscriber target of catching up with the likes of Tifo. And with that, we're out.